Now, please, imagine the outrage if a major American academic were to publish a book with the title, Why Hitler Was Right. And let us not forget the various ways in which Marxism has spread successfully through American institutions and culture. Consider the Marxist-inspired Occupy Wall Street movement and the fawning treatment that it has received from the mainstream media. Unknown to most Americans is the existence of a vast left-wing conspiracy, a fifth column, which includes the mainstream media and scores of various left-wing think tanks such as the Institute for Policy Studies, community organizing groups such as ACORN, unions such as the Service Employees International Union, professional organizations such as the National Education Association, philanthropic organizations such as the MacArthur Foundation or the Ford Foundation, special interest advocacy groups such as Media Matters, religious organizations such as the Interreligious Foundation for Community Organization, political parties such as the Working Families Party, indoctrination boot camps such as the Midwest Academy, and then, of course, there are the universities. Oh, yeah, and let's not forget the recent announcement of the Socialist Party of America that 70 Democratic members of Congress are associated with the SPA, right? But not the Grover Cleveland Democrats. As the Newsweek headline put it just 2 years ago, we're all socialists now. So then let my talk tonight serve as a warning. Marxism is not dead. It is very much alive. In fact, its presence in American culture, I would argue, is greater today than it ever has been, although it is much less seen. The Marxist ideal has been unwittingly accepted by millions of ordinary, everyday Americans. The rebirth of Marxism surely compels decent people to ask several questions. What is the relationship between Marxism in theory and communism in practice? Are Stalinism, Maoism, and Pol Potism aberrations from true Marxism or its fulfillment? Why has virtually every Marxist regime turned into a totalitarian dictatorship? In other words, are tyranny and terror built into the DNA of Marxism? Behind these important questions, though, I think are more interesting and fundamental questions. Why do men become communists? Why are so many intellectuals still attracted to Marxism despite its mass murdering history? What is the source of Marxism's power over the minds of men? Most people tend to think of Marxism as a scientific theory that attempts to describe the laws of economics and social organization, and which predicts the fall of capitalism and the rise of socialism. Marx did claim, after all, to be a scientific socialist. I do not think, however, that many people over the course of the last 150 years have been motivated to become socialists by reading the interminably boring Das Kapital. Nor do I think Marx's economic interpretation of history, his labor theory of value, or his theory of dialectical materialism have inspired men and women around the world to dedicate their lives to socialist revolution. There must be something much more powerful about Marxism that appeals to the moral psychology of certain kinds of people. So let's start with the obvious. Marxism's promises were thoroughly utopian in scope. It promised to eliminate poverty, inequality, exploitation, class conflict, war, and alienation. Communism, Marx argued, would emancipate man from the slavery of capitalism and create a socialist heaven on earth. Marxism, therefore, provides a kind of secular religion of hope and redemption in a world of declining religious faith. Marx was also a master psychologist. He understood that there is a class of people in every society who, like himself, are motivated in their day-to-day lives by envy, resentment, and hatred. Such people always blame others for their condition and plight. And Marxism speaks directly to such people. It comes to them as a gospel of anger, resentment, and victimhood. It tells such men why they suffer and for whom. Marxism provides a kind of redemptive hope to those who are frustrated, angry, impotent, and unhappy. And so the theme of my talk tonight is that Marxism must be seen first and foremost not as a scientific theory, but rather as a moral theory. It is Marx's moralism, his angry, spitting moralism, and the allure it held for a certain kind of moral sensibility that is the source of socialism's greatest appeal. Discovering the moral psychology that has driven so many people to Marxism, I think, is one of the great intellectual challenges of our time. To that end, we shall examine tonight the following 3 verses from the Holy Book of Marx that I think sum up his moral values. From the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844, quote, "The enemy of being is having." 2, from his critique of the Gotha program, the famous lines probably many of you know, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his need." And 3rd, from his theses on Feuerbach, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point is to change it." Now, the first verse sums up Marx's critique of capitalism. The second states communism's moral vision or ideal. And the third is a commandment to action. And what I'd like to do now is to take up each in turn. The enemy of being is having. The most common view of Karl Marx suggests that he opposed capitalism because he thought it unjust. Unjust because it creates a world of inequality, exploitation, and class conflict. Marxian socialism, according to this view, is all about equalizing income and social status. This is the so-called late Marxism of Das Kapital, of Stalin, and of the old left. It appeals to a powerful human emotion, envy. But Marx also advanced a deeper, more philosophical critique of capitalism, one that challenged the very idea of having. That is, the idea of acquiring and accumulating any material wealth at all. Now, this is the so-called early Marxism of the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844, of Pol Pot, and of the New Left. It is a much more radical Marxism that appeals to a very different type of human emotion, hatred. At the deepest level, Marx was an opponent of capitalism because he thought it immoral. Immoral because it dehumanized man by forcing him to become totally alienated from his work, from the product of his labor, from himself, and from his fellow men. The ultimate idea of alienation for Marx can be summed up with the sentiment that he expressed in the 1844 manuscripts. This idea of the enemy of being is having. Now, parsing philosophically what Marx meant by this cryptic notion is crucial, I think, to understanding the inner core of his thought, and also to understanding why revolutionaries acting in Marx's name exterminated tens of millions of people, and why it continues to influence people to this day. For Marx, the spirit of acquisition and the accumulation of material wealth engendered by capitalism are anathema to man's true being. The more a man acquires in the form of material possessions, according to Marx, the more estranged and alienated he is from his true essence or his true humanity. And Marx describes in the economic and philosophical manuscripts his meaning in these terms. Quote, the less you eat, drink, and read books, the less you go to the theater, the dance hall, the public house, the less you think, love, theorize, sing, paint, fence, the more you save, the greater becomes your treasure which neither moths nor dust will devour. The less you are, the more you have. The less you express your own life, the greater is your alienated life. The greater is the store of your estranged being. Close quote. By this